guys, welcome here. If you're new here, my name's Bethany. I'm the girl behind Well Loved Knits. I'm wearing my Cumulus tee and a self-drafted dress, ready for the spring, summery weather that we're having right now. And I wanted to sit down and talk to you guys about yarn, because who doesn't love to sit down and chat about yarn? This is a video that I have both wanted to record and put off recording for a really long time. I get questions a lot asking what kind of yarns do I recommend? And I feel like it's just such a difficult topic to cover because I'm one crafter who isn't the fastest of knitters, and I've only welcomed a small portion of what's out there into my yarn stash, and I've only been able to work with even a small portion of that, you know? I'm no expert, of course, but even still, I thought it would be nice to kind of think through the yarns that I've been loving lately, the brands that I really love, and also on the flip side, maybe share some brands that I'm not so crazy about anymore. Not trying to be dramatic or anything, not trying to, have drama. But I thought it would be interesting to kind of note some of my opinions and how they've changed when it comes to fibers that I want to work with. So I had a good look at my stash. I really thought about it and I was thinking, okay, what are the yarns that I've been working with a lot and that I would continue to work with a lot? Kind of rating them in my mind, and then I wanted from that to create a short list of ones that I would personally recommend and tell you a little bit about what I like about them. So I did a destash recently, and that meant that I was taking out a lot of yarn from my stash. I thought through, why did I take out some yarns? Why did some yarns stay? And from there, I created this little short list that I wouldn't say like is the end all be all to what I would personally work with. There's definitely room for a lot of more fibers, but I wanted to share with you the ones that stood out in case you're interested in trying some of these if you haven't already. But I mean, I think you might have. Because the first one is pretty basic and very, you probably are already guessing it. You know it, I know it. We all know Knitting for Olive is very mainstream, very popular, and I feel like that is for good reason. When I'm talking about Knitting for Olive, I'm talking about their fingering weight merino. I have many skeins in my stash, and I've also knit with quite a few that are no longer in my stash, so I've worked through them. It's definitely a fiber that I've worked with a lot, especially recently, so it's definitely top of mind, which made it at the top of this list. What sets them above and beyond a lot of other brands is their colors. They're soft, they're neutral, and yet warm. Really love their color match options so that you can find certain fibers that you want to work together with. If you want to hold things together into strands, they have the ability for you to shop that way on their website, which I think is a really awesome feature, and no other brand, to my knowledge, offers something like that. The merino is 100% natural. It's non-superwash, but it's so soft to the touch. It's a really great knitting experience. It feels good on my fingers, and I've never had any trouble with it. So that really matters to me when it comes to yarn. If it doesn't feel good when I'm working with it, either if it irritates my finger, or doesn't slide off the needles really nicely, those are things that I mentally take note of, and it really does prevent me from shopping for a yarn in the future. So this one does not have any of that, which makes it something that I would purchase with my money, all of my money, time and again. I'm going to butcher this one, but it's one of my favorites. Schackenmeyer. I really love that yarn for its self-striping colorways. I feel like it is the king. They are the king of self-striping sock yarn. Their Regia base is something that we all, I think, talk about. Regia tweed is definitely something that is very popular, and I'm even working with it right now. But it's not necessarily this, while I do really love this yarn that they offer with the neps, and yeah, the tweed looks really nice. I just really love them for their self-striping yarn. And there's one that I've knit with, and those are my go-to pair of socks. There are probably other factors that made it the most wearable that I have, but it's definitely the self-striping aspect of it. I just really love the way that the fabric turned out. But then I also just really love the consistency of the fabric too. It's not just the looks, but the way it feels on my feet and how it washes and wears. I can put it in the washing machine and it's very durable. And of course the tweed is really popular, and it's something that I've got on the needles right now. I also saw another one that was more of a cotton base, but it's still a sock set that was very interesting to me. So I definitely want to give that a try. So you can find so many exciting shades to really turn on your sock mojo, which I personally found that this brand of yarn has unlocked that for me. I don't know, it might just be a coincidence, but it is my favorite sock yarn 100%. I've also worked with the brands Superwash Merino, and I actually have that one here. I have knit with this yarn many times to make hats. And while it is superwash yarn and that's not something that I actually like, I have really enjoyed the finished fabric of this yarn in particular and the feeling that it gives when it knits. Because you really can notice the difference between superwash and non-superwash. It's not that I detest working with superwash yarn, but when you work with non-superwash for the majority of your making, when you start knitting with superwash, you really can notice a difference. So this one has just been enjoyable, and I feel like the quality of it was really good. I made hats for my husband and my father, and I think both of them have worn very nicely, and they look really nice too. So I really would recommend this other type of yarn from this brand. Another yarn that I've been loving for socks is Zauberball, which is another German company actually. So depending where you are in the world, this one might also not be very easily accessible to you, might be a little more expensive to get your hands on it, but I can attest to my part of the world where it is pretty accessible and I think pretty budget friendly, or good value at least. Maybe not budget friendly, maybe it is a little bit more on the expensive side, Zauberballs, but for what it is, I think it's definitely worth putting your money towards. And it's kind of like spin cycle yarn a little bit. I've definitely seen people comparing the two or saying that this is a really good alternative for spin cycle yarn. Definitely more budget friendly than spin cycle yarn. This yarn definitely made the list because it's curbing that craving for hand spun yarn. So if you're not able, or you just don't want to get into that rabbit hole, you can definitely give some hand spun style yarn a try in your projects with something like this. And I really, really love the different colors in it, and it's just a surprise. It's very similar to self-striping yarn in the sense that the colors are always changing, and I think that gets me really excited, at least for socks, to have that kind of variation in a project. So I've been really loving knitting with these. I've made a couple of projects already. The yarn comes wound up in a ball, which makes it pretty difficult to see all the colors that are in there. So if you're into that sort of thing, it's a nice surprise. Sometimes if you want something a little bit more predictable, this might not be the right choice for you. They do share a little bit of a preview if you're shopping online. And even on the tag, it comes with a little preview of what the striping will look like. But I've found that there is still some variation in there, so it's not going to predict exactly what it looks like. But that's kind of the beauty of working with yarn like this. So I feel like if you're in the market for something like this, you're gonna want a little bit of a surprise, or you'll be open to it. Next, I want to highlight Woolly Knit Cones, and it's not just because they have sponsored and sent this yarn to me for free, although that definitely does sweeten the deal. I'm going to be honest with you in my personal opinion about it, because when you work with something that you don't really have to pay for, I'm going to be honest with you guys, it definitely gives you a more positive opinion. But I did really want to include it because even still, I have purchased Woolly Knit Cones in the past. I personally got an entire oversized sweater. Of course, this varies depending on what your personal measurements are and what kind of ease and fit you would like. But I was able to get that sweater plus have some left over for other projects in the future. That could easily be a hat project or, something for color work, if not more than that. So I'm definitely impressed with how far the yarn goes. And then the price point makes it really, really attractive. Their color selection is really good. Maybe not so much for the merino cones. I would knock them down a little bit because their British wool is where they put all of the colors. I don't know why they don't offer the same colors to their merino base. I knit with 2 strands of their merino held together, and I will say that it's not the fanciest of feelings. It's not like, ooh, so soft to the touch, but it's not itchy next to skin either. You can knit up a sweater on its own. You don't have to purchase anything else. So at the price point, I think it's very attractive. So I've tried a decent amount of mohair. I wouldn't say I've tried everything out there, but I even have in my stash some brands, like Veritas, which is local to me, not so great. I have Tilia, which I've knit with and liked. I have Drops, which I've knit with and liked. But I think the one that I would say, you know, that's special to me is Hip Knit Shop mohair. I really like this mohair. I feel like for the knitting experience as well as the finished garment, the North sweater that I have that's knit with this yarn is probably my most worn garment to date. It just feels so good, wears really nicely, and I just love the colorways, and yeah, it's just really soft to the touch. It doesn't look like anything special. It looks like every other mohair out there. And let me be honest, it's not too much that really sets this mohair apart from the other ones in my stash. I just have really enjoyed and had a really positive feeling with that sweater that I made. And I just think that I want to work with this more in the future. So that's why it got pushed to #1 on my list for mohair. I think you can really get some exciting garments knit up with this yarn. So I would definitely recommend it for that. Depending where you are in the world, I don't think it would be the easiest for you to get your hands on. So that's definitely something to consider. But if you are in the position where you can try it out, I definitely think it's worth your while. I don't work with cotton very often, but when I first started knitting again and started knitting garments, I worked with it a lot actually. I will say though that my experience with multiple brands is very slim, so do take my recommendation with a grain of salt, but I would say the one cotton that I've really liked over all of the other ones that I've tried is Wool & Gang's Shiny Happy Cotton. I don't like cotton just because I feel like it wears down so easily. If you're really hard wearing on cotton, I feel like it just looks exhausted after only a few wears. So it's definitely not my favorite to work with, because with wool, it stays, the more you wear it, it makes it better, you know? It's in the name. I feel like that shiny quality that it has definitely makes, or at least tricks my brain into thinking that the cotton is staying fresh for longer. And if I just compare that yarn to the other cottons that I've had on my needles, I just really don't like the knitting experience with cotton because it easily slips off the needle. It splits when I'm working kind of fast. And then on my hands, it's not really the greatest to feel, I think. So that's kind of where it goes down in my book. But with Shiny Happy Cotton, I never really experienced all of that. I will say their Billie Jean yarn, I definitely experienced that. It's definitely rough to the touch, but it is a recycled fiber, so maybe that's also something to consider. So as far as cotton goes, that would be my pick. So those are my current favorites for wool, mohair, and cotton. And that's not encompassing all of the fibers that I've worked with. That's certainly not encompassing all of the fibers that are out there. I can tell you that I haven't had positive experiences with linen or bamboo, so I just didn't really include anything for that. And then there are some fibers like alpaca and cashmere where I've really only worked with 1 or 2 types of yarn brands with those kind of fibers. So I just really didn't think that those recommendations would be helpful at this point. So let's now move into yarn that I will not be working with again. First one is We Are Knitters, period. And it's really not about their controversy that they had last year, at least not in full. I just have been looking at that brand, and maybe it was that controversy that really made me look at it in a different light. I don't know. Would you call it like a fast fashion? Is it really just because of the Zara collaboration that I'm looking at We Are Knitters as the Zara of yarn brands? I don't know, maybe. But that's really kind of the taste that I have with brands like that. And I was looking at it and I was thinking about all of the yarns that I've worked with them. I've worked with their cotton, I've worked with their really chunky wool, I've worked with their more petite wool. I've worked with a lot of yarn that We Are Knitters offers. The interesting thing is that I've purchased all of those when I did purchase them at a discount. I never paid full price for We Are Knitters yarn. They have sales every weekend, it seems. I don't really pay much attention to it anymore, but at least at the time, a year or so ago, they had sales all the time. And that's when I would purchase yarn from them. I would never really buy it at full price. And I think that says something about the quality and how they've marked up their prices. I just feel like the quality of that yarn is not worth it for the full asking price that they ask for. When it's 30% off, which they do quite often, I think, okay, yeah, maybe I'll get a couple of skeins. But no more. I'm really not interested in working with that yarn because I just don't feel like even the style of that brand really resonates with me anymore. I feel like if I am going to purchase from a larger than life name brand of yarn, would be at Wool & the Gang. And even still, I've kind of pared that back. I haven't really shopped with them for over a year, if not more. I don't really think that I'll put my money towards Wool & the Gang either, although I wouldn't say never, because I still feel like that brand, the style of their kits and the concept behind it, and I do think that they're a little bit more genuine in their push for sustainability. They definitely have, I just feel like their messaging is a little bit on point and more consistent in that area. You can't really get away from commercial brands, I feel like, if you're at a certain price point, but definitely Wool & the Gang and We Are Knitters are both very high price points for being more commercial and for just the quality that they offer, I think. The only thing that I think those two brands have going for them is that super chunky wool. I think they're unrivaled in that area. Just some of the alternatives just don't meet the same standard or the same color options, that sort of thing. So I think if you're in the market for a really super chunky wool, I would definitely point you to those two stores. However, for all of the other options that they have available, I think it's overpriced for what it is. Another one that I won't work with, again, because I had a really bad experience. It's not necessarily the brand, because I do like the brand for other types of yarn, but I don't like the Rowan Cash Soft Merino. No, I don't like the Rowan Cotton Cashmere. I think that branding it as a cotton cashmere kind of deceives you into thinking that it's a little bit more luxurious than what it is. The cotton cashmere that I worked with from Rowan, maybe it was a bad batch, I don't know. I think that's highly unlikely. It worked more like a cotton and it wore out just even in my hands. Like, knitting with it was not nice. It did not look like a nice quality yarn, at least in my opinion. I just didn't enjoy the knitting process of it, so therefore I didn't actually finish the project that I was working on it with. So I would definitely not be purchasing and not be knitting that again in the future. And finally, the last one I can think of at this moment that I can definitely say I will never be knitting with it again is the Hobbii Diablo Mohair. I did not like that experience, and I think you get what you pay for in this circumstance. I don't turn my nose up at budget-friendly yarns, but I do think that I shouldn't be so upset about how the knitting experience was with that yarn because I paid so little for it. I think it really tore up my finger. The entire time that I was knitting my cardigan number 7, held together with some drops air, the Diablo Mohair was ripping into my finger and I just wanted it off the needles. I was very happy with the finished piece when it first was off my needles, but then after hand washing it a couple of times, the feeling of the fabric just got very plasticky, and it was definitely from the mohair. Of course, I mean, it's mixed with acrylic. What can I really expect? There's nothing wrong with acrylic yarn, but I do think in this case, it kind of reduced the quality of my finished piece, and definitely gave an itchy quality to the cardigan. Didn't stop me from wearing the cardigan, and I really enjoyed the cardigan. And actually, I want to preserve that cardigan, so I'm being a lot more gentle on it and not wearing it as often because I just want to keep it nice for memory's sake. But if I were to knit another cardigan number 7, which I don't really see myself doing in the future, I would definitely not be purchasing that mohair. And I think if we're going for budget, Drops mohair is so much nicer for the price, and it feels really good on the fingers. I think it's a really good quality, budget-friendly yarn. So there you have it. Those are my yarn picks, as well as some that I just will not be putting my money towards again in the future. I would be curious to hear what you guys love to knit with. What have you been really into lately? And on the flip side, are there any yarns that you just don't? Again, I don't really want to cause any drama. That was really not what this was. I was just sharing my experience, and I would be curious to hear yours as well. If you like this video, definitely give it a like. I would really appreciate it. It helps me out so much. And maybe subscribe if you'd like to stick around. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.